We're going to start with how to create data products as reusable data components, the key to data agility and value. This will be presented by Rick Hall, CEO of Coginiti. So Rick has spent nearly 3 decades in the analytics industry. This includes designing and implementing over 100 systems and analytic products. Following Rick, we're going to hear from Anthony Dayton, Data Products General Manager at Tamer, on demystifying data products, essential insights for business and technical buyers. So Rick, over to you.
Great. Thank you, Kevin, and thank you, Wayne, for putting the event together. And of course, thank you, Michael, for your presentation. It's always great to hear a customer and what they're doing with their stuff. Wayne, if you can advance there. So just to set the stage for what we're trying to do, we're in a world today where only a third of chief analytics or data officers indicate they're achieving their ROI goals. And moving ahead, what we hear is that over half of data leaders indicate problems with quality data. Nearly the same number indicate reuse is a challenge. We hear significant problems with rework and oftentimes with data quality and inconsistent results. Moving ahead. So if you look at the past year, we've had this enormous turnover in data leaders and CDAOs. It reached its highest level in 2023 with nearly half of all data leaders, according to Randy Bean, who surveys these folks, have been replaced. So, that's a real problem, right? If we think about where we are as an industry, are we achieving the value that we want to achieve in the time frame that we want to achieve it? So when I think about data products, I think about it in this context of how do we build an infrastructure and a process that's going to allow us to achieve quality with our results and do so quickly in a business environment that is under constant change. So in my thinking about data products, we think about that in an architecture that needs to support rapid change. Moving ahead, we think of that in terms of 4 key principles that I'm going to talk about and get into details around what we think of as a component-based strategy for data products. And it really starts with the delivery of quality granular data. Oftentimes, granular data is hidden from the business, buried in a deep pipeline. We're trying to deliver a report, but when business folks need to answer questions that are unanticipated, that data needs to be available. We see the critical need to empower business teams because they need to move quickly. We can't deliver everything that a business needs for analytics through a central team. It's just not realistic anymore. But we need to also be able to curate the results of those business users so that we can identify what's most useful in the business and ultimately to foster collaboration and reuse. I want to talk about these principles and what it means in terms of how you implement data products. Moving on. So let's start with granular data products. Before starting Coginiti, I ran the data team for retail sales at Nielsen. And we built large pipelines that had to span the globe to analyze price impact and promotion based on a history of activity. Well, if you think about the work that we did, we didn't think about COVID impacting the business. So along comes 2019 and ultimately 2020, and suddenly COVID's out there. And we have more and more business teams all over the world who need to be able to analyze their business in a changing environment. And those models that we've built over a period of time are no longer going to work. So one of the challenges I think that we all face in analytics is when we build big structured analytic deliveries, that when business changes, we often need to be able to get back to the granular data and look at it in a different way. So exposing granular data as a data product is the foundation in our point of view. So what does that mean, building granular data products? So the characteristics of a data product that Wayne talked about absolutely apply. There's ownership and accountability. We see, particular for granular data products, that ownership being as close to the source as possible. We want them, of course, to be discoverable, clearly named, that they have some known quality and a timely delivery, and they have appropriate security and access applied. All those things are standard for any thinking about a data product. But when we think about granular data products, they also have minimal aggregation and transformation. So they're really as close to the source as possible. They are cleansed, they do have quality, and they have master data linkage, so we can link them to other data assets or data products across the organization. So if we build granular data products as a foundation, we can support known use cases, those dashboards that we need to deliver. We can also support unknown use cases that are going to come up in a changing business environment. So if you think about kind of a lakehouse architecture that lots of folks talk about, a medallion architecture, you might think of granular data products in the silver layer. So they're one step up from raw data. They've been cleansed. They have some accountability, but they're going to be flexible to be used in multiple ways in the business. Now, if we've built those products, we ultimately want to deliver them both for known use cases and to empower business teams to do things that we didn't anticipate. A conversation with CDAO of a large health company recently, 200 members of his team, 6,000 folks who need to analyze data. No way they can keep up with that demand. Ultimately, the ability to enable access to data products, embrace data literacy in the business, and provision self-service tools like the kind that Michael's team is working with. That's what you need to do. Moving ahead. Ultimately, however, if we have business teams building their own analytics, we need to identify what's most useful from that process. So if you think about the kind of governance process that Wayne talked about, you might think of that as kind of a top-down organizational structure. Well, if we've got people in the business also building analytics, we need a bottoms-up process that's going to allow us to curate the best of that work and make it available to other users. So we need to empower users to be able to publish content. We need to identify and implement components that others can use. And ultimately, that's going to be enabled by an analytic catalog and a publishing process that allows these reusable components to be available. Moving on. So when we talk to people in the business, there's a number of things that we hear from customers. 80% of data engineers and business analysts, those folks out in the field, need to be able to share their work. 70% of those folks do so in a highly unstructured way, with emails or chat or shared files. 20%, perhaps mostly on the engineering side, use some structured tool, whether it's a Git repository, Jira, or something like an analytics catalog that we provide. And half of data leaders talk to turnover as a critical challenge. So we've got this critical need to reuse work. We've got turnover happening in the business. And what do we see? We see things like this, where I can't find the analysis I need. When I do, the documentation is poor, and I'm not sure if the version is current. When analysts need to work together, this is not the environment we want to have. So we want to enable collaboration and reuse. And we do that by defining a clear repository of quality analytics. Those can be granular data products at the foundation. And there are a series of analytic data products that are built on top and ultimately perhaps delivered as dashboards or other things. And those analytic data products is where we're going to see metrics and aggregations and other kinds of macros that are suitable for downstream business use. Those are built on top of a foundation of exposed and available granular data products. And data products, of course, are managed, they're governed, they're approved, they're published. We have an internal marketing and awareness capability. Wayne talked a little bit about that. Think of it as kind of a data store or a place you can access data. And we need all of that to be directly accessible from the environment where users are building and accessing data. So as Michael Ross talked about, sometimes that's as simple as a SQL query. They can pull from a catalog, they can use it. It might be a component of something else that they're going to use. And then we need to think about how we're going to build and into our organization and facilitate a process where we're training folks to think about reuse from the get-go, and to think about the fact that the data products they're building are not only going to serve the use that they start with, but they're oftentimes going to be foundational to address those unknown use cases for which we have all these business analysts floating around the organization who in many cases today are pulling data and putting in Excel and doing something different because they're not in a situation where they can easily wait for a central team to deliver that result. So if you think about what does this mean in the real world? So if I take that kind of consumer goods example, what we were doing at Nielsen, we were building analysis for understanding sales and promotional activity and helping field sales folks deliver to the business. So we had a whole series of foundational data sets, retail sales, shipments to retailers, promotional activity. Those sets of data came together to build a set of higher order analytics, things like expected sales, incremental sales, promotional profits, et cetera. We looked at stockouts and lost opportunities, actually a whole series of complex things. And we delivered initially very much in a traditional fashion where we had large, complex SQL and other things that were not exposed. And we exposed the promotional dashboards or the field sales dashboards. Moving ahead, what that meant is when the unplanned happens, new retailer, some weather event, corporate competitive activities, COVID hits, it all had to come back to that central team. They're the only folks who could see the underlying capabilities, and people had to wait in line. So what's a different approach? So we think about components of reusable analytics as a better way. So if we expose retail sales and shipments and the expected promotional activity as data products, not only can they service the dashboard that we built and delivered as a critical data product, but they can also service the unexpected use case. And we see those use cases delivered in a self-service manner where business users, or in some cases engineers, can go directly to known data products at a more foundational level, and they can self-service and build their own analytics. And I indicate that kind of in a different color here, yellow, because initially they're developed on their own and they're used on their own. In some cases, they might just be using the initial retail sales and a combination of calculations that are stored separately as components. However, if you move on here, ultimately, if you have a process of curation, what initially started out as self-service analytics can be curated and available in the catalog for others to use. So we start out with an environment, certainly where we're going to deliver these promotional dashboards in this case, but we do so by building a series of reusable components that are published as data products in our catalog. Those support our known use case. They also supported some unknown use case. A business user or a business analyst can address that unknown use case by reusing the components that we've built, and that result can be curated and available to others for reuse. And if you think about this kind of environment, it's really different than kind of the traditional top-down centralized data warehouse world. It's much more analogous to an open source world where users are able to work and build their own stuff and contribute to a better way of doing things. So if you think about this, then if you have an analytic catalog that's available for reuse, not only do you have clearly defined calculations that others can use, that is also foundational when you think about how you're going to apply things like generative AI to your business, right? We've all seen the examples where Gen AI can produce some great SQL queries, but how does it know what the calculation is of expected sales? And how does it know where to get that in a correct way in order to use it to answer a business question? Well, it needs to be able to get it from a catalog of available analytics that are built over time, initially to support known use cases, but evolve in a component-oriented fashion. So when we think about data products, we're thinking about it in this larger context. We're thinking that data products are ultimately going to support what we know about today and what we know about. We're going to evolve our data organization with a collaboration between our engineering teams and our business teams. We're going to see things evolve. And as they evolve, we're going to publish them and make them reusable for others.